There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another Friday Reads. Even though it's probably going to be warm enough to film outside, what happens is I wait until it warms up enough, because it's certainly not warm enough in the morning in early October. Even with the balmy days we're still enjoying. And then I'm up past midnight editing and publishing the video. So I think that, and unless it gets warmer earlier in the day, and that probably won't be until next May or whenever, it's going to be indoor Friday Reads, because I don't like staying up so late to finish the video and less people watch it, because if you don't post it at the prime time and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I've had an interesting reading week. And I don't really have much personal news. I am still looking for more work. I found out that one of the cushiest, most high-paying teaching jobs that I still have back in Japan, it's like $60 for a 1-hour lesson. It's only twice a month. I wish it was every day, but it's only twice a month. Teaching at a corporation, and it's a little social club for English newspaper reading, and I've been teaching it for over 10 years, on and off, and they have just added a third class per month. So that's an extra $60. Well, by the time with the Japanese yen being so weak or whatever currency exchange, it's not quite $60, but it is better than a kick in the pants. And that will help a little bit. This new job where I'm marking stuff with this composition correction service in Tokyo, I have to just sit at my computer, and I mean, it's easy to have this window open when I'm reading or something, but if I'm away from home or whatever, it's a lot more difficult, and just keep hitting, not refresh, but clicking, well, I could just hit refresh, but the list of orders, and they don't stay up there very long, and usually I get 2 or 3 a day, so that's about $10 a day, and I spend about 3 hours on those for $10, so that doesn't work out to be much. That's my choice, but once I get busier, I won't be able to devote so much time on each tiny little entry. But in the last 3 days, I've been doing it for 6 weeks now, and in the last 3 days, it just seems to have dried up. I don't know if there's another new teacher they've hired that is more avidly hitting refresh than I am, but yesterday I didn't get any, and the day before I got one, and this morning I grabbed one, but usually I have no trouble getting 2 or 3 a day, so I'm going to be hitting that button throughout this Friday Reads, and if I get one, you'll hear about it. I am coming to terms with the fact that as much sense as it made for Kenji and I to move here, for all kinds of emotional, personal, family reasons, and for my own peace of mind, did you know that my blood pressure has been normal since I got back to Saskatoon? I don't think I've mentioned that. So Tokyo was doing a number on me. There is something audacious and impractical about uprooting myself as a man in my mid-50s and moving to a place where there's only about 10 positions in the entire city for ESL teaching, and so those open up about once every 3 years. There might be a new job position. I might be slightly exaggerating, but there's no work here for me in ESL. I have concluded I'm going to keep checking and so on. I'm having better luck trying to find work online, but I've got about 9 years left before I retire, and it's kind of silly to have uprooted myself and try to start over in a new place where there isn't a lot of work for somebody with my resume. So I have just applied for a part-time job, 8 hours a week, at the branch of the public library that's just down the street from where I live. And boy, it's a low-paying job, but it would help, and I would love to work in a library. And I have some other ideas about how I'm going to make ends meet. Kenji will have no trouble getting a job because every restaurant in Saskatoon is hiring waiter staff and every other kind of staff, and that's what Kenji's interested in to start. If I was younger and more able-bodied, I would enjoy that too, but that's impossible for me. But the kind of work that I might get, there isn't a lot of it out there. I checked for jobs at the university. There was a ton of them. I don't have any qualifications for any of them. You know, they are looking for somebody who has work experience in the field for which they're hiring, that this job pertains to, and I don't have any of that. So I might apply to 1 or 2 of them just to see what happens, but So that's been a little bit of a downer, but I'm trying to stay focused on the positive, and the immigration application process is proceeding. I think that our lawyer will be submitting it within the next few weeks, and then we can start to think about when Kenji will get here. So that's what's going on. Time to hit the button here again. Nothing. I have had an interesting reading week. Not as good in some ways as the week before, but you will be relieved to know that I don't have as much to tell you, so it's going to be a much shorter Friday reads than the Saturday reads was last week. Now, how does this, the stats are confusing. I have 2 bales to tell you about. I have started 2 books that I have not yet finished, and I have finished 2. I believe that's how it boils down. So let's start with the negative, and this, I am uncomfortable with the fact that I bailed on 2 books by Indigenous Canadian authors. That's just the way the ball bounces. I do not go on any kind of a rant about a non-white author anymore. I just don't. And I don't give star ratings to books by marginalized authors that I don't like, but I just don't give a rating. And I don't give ratings to my bails. Very briefly, I bailed on Billy Ray Belcourt's memoir, A History of My Brief Body. It's the last thing I will ever try by him, I'm quite sure, because there was one essay that I read to Lindy that I quite liked, but I really disliked a book of his poetry, and I really, really could not stand the writing in here. It's just way too academic for me. I will listen to him read anything, and if I can find an audiobook that he himself has narrated, because he has just a beautiful, gentle, gay voice, and I can feel the meaning underneath the words, but when I'm reading it, the academic jargon obstructs any connection that I might try to find with what he's saying. So that happened. And then I tried this novella that I got from the library. It is by a Quebec Cree writer. It's called The Lover, the Lake by Virginia Pésémapéo Bordeleau, translated from the French by Susan Ouriou. This is a love story, should have been my first warning, between a Cree woman and a Métis man. It's a little complicated because the Cree woman is married and expecting her first baby with her husband, but he's up somewhere trapping or fishing or something. But she falls in love with this Métis guy. She has been raised by her grandmother, and her grandmother's backstory was fascinating. But I couldn't get past the horrific sex writing and the overly romantic descriptions of the relationship between the 2 main characters. I tried, I couldn't stand it, I bailed. There's a lot of readers out there that this would be the perfect read for, and I recommend it to you, just like I would with Billy Ray Belcourt, and in fact I know Lindy loved the Billy Ray Belcourt memoir. So those were my bails. I have started 2 that are still in progress. One of them is this wonderful collection of essays. Well, I don't know, what is this? I think they would count as standalone essays, but the purpose of this book, Courting Saskatchewan, by my old prof, David Carpenter, the subtitle is A Celebration of Winter Feasts, Summer Loves, and Rising Brookies. Oh, I hadn't noticed that in the title. What the hell is a brookie? I haven't got to that part of the book. This is wonderful. I'm so glad I'm enjoying it, because I'm going to be seeing him next week. He's launching his latest memoir, and I'm going to that reading. And I have just barely scraped together enough money that the one book I can buy in October will be his memoir. Thanks to that extra class I was just telling you about that I got back in Tokyo. But what he's up to in this book is he is talking about how he, as a person who grew up, I think, in Eastern Canada and came to Saskatchewan in 1975, maybe, and he's been here ever since. But how he made Saskatoon, or the province of Saskatchewan, his home, and the kind of rituals, this is not a spiritual book, but the kind of rituals that he enacted and took part in that made Saskatchewan home. He is a very humorous writer. I just read this morning about winter and snow and January in Saskatchewan. So let me read you just a few short passages here. He's talking about one morning when his car won't start and he has to ask his next door neighbor in Saskatoon to boost him, right? Don't ask whether this is Fahrenheit or Celsius. This is minus 37. Don't ask whether this is Fahrenheit or Celsius. If you ever lived on the prairies or in Alaska, you probably know that when it's this cold, the two systems are almost identical. Readers who are still on the old Fahrenheit system will be interested to know that when the temperature reaches 40 degrees below 0 Celsius, it is also precisely 40 degrees below Fahrenheit. This is so because at this extreme low point, the two systems cross. This intersection of the two systems at such a frigid moment strikes me as a curious blend of the mathematical and the empathetic. When it's 40 below in Lignite, North Dakota, it's also 40 below in Beanfate, Saskatchewan, pronounced Beanfate, Saskatchewan. When could you ever find greater empathy between nations than when their citizens' fates intersect with their systems for measuring these fates? I got a kick out of that. And then he's talking about walking across the Broadway Bridge to go to the library downtown with his, I'm not sure if his partner, I don't know if she's his wife or not, I think so, but she is an artist in her own right, and her first name here is Kiever. Kiever and I crossed the Broadway Bridge, so walking across the Broadway Bridge in January. Kiever and I crossed the Broadway Bridge on our way to the downtown library. We both have on blue coats and we both have our hoods up. Frozen on the collars of both our coats is a fine, pure white layer of breath. Conversation is difficult, though not impossible. She turns to me, nudges my arm, and I turn to her. Face to face, she tells me that she has no feeling in her legs. So yeah, this is what I have to look forward to. This brings back lots of memories of growing up in Saskatchewan and living in Saskatoon for years on and off in my early young adulthood, and this is what I have to look forward to. If I haven't made it clear already, I'm really enjoying this. And I'm also really enjoying this biography of Queen Victoria's mother by Dulcie Ashdown, published in 1974. I'm so glad that I finally got a copy, because when I first was aware of it, I couldn't find a copy anywhere online, but I checked years later and there it was. So Leah and I, she got a copy too, and Leah in Calgary and I are buddy reading it. We haven't checked in yet, so Leah, don't watch, but I love the writing and I love the story. I knew almost nothing about what's being detailed here about Queen Victoria's mother was Victoire, and she was a German princess from the Coburg area. And I didn't know anything about her early life. I knew she'd been married before and she had 2 kids, so that Queen Victoria had 2 half-siblings. But that's all I knew. And there's a whole bunch, I mean, I'm not very far into it. I just finished the first chapter, so I'm on page 28, and I got so much gossipy, wonderfully salacious, not only that, but quite a bit of that, detail about her family's life, love life, sex life, and her first husband, and the history of Napoleon and how that screwed up everything. And if I haven't said already, because I'm getting a little overexcited here, Queen Victoria's mother, her name was Victoire, and I don't know how it would be pronounced in German, but I'm pronouncing it the French way, Victoire, and she changed it later in life to Victoria, but yes. Oh, this is just delicious. And Dulcie Ashdown, where have you been all my life? I can't find anything about like an obituary or anything, but I did find an obituary for her daughter, and she and her daughter lived together for years, and apparently they fought like crazy, because I found her daughter's published eulogy that was given by the priest, and he talked about how proud the daughter was of Dulcie Ashdown for all of her writing and research, but that they fought like crazy. So I know that Dulcie Ashdown is no longer with us, but oh, this is so well written. It is just gripping. So those 2 are in progress. I scrambled around, and I often get into trouble when I do this, so I'm glad that these 2 that I did find and finish worked out. But sometimes when I want to replace one book that's been a bail with another book in the same category, I end up just, having a massacre of bails. Bing, 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 bing. But I did find 2. They're very short, but they were the only things that I finished this week, both on ebook, that were by Indigenous authors. Oh, I better check. I haven't checked for a few minutes. Check. Nothing. I got so excited talking about the royal biography, I forgot to check if there's any new orders. Okay. So I don't know how to pronounce this man's surname, so let me find that out. Here we go. got 5 out of 5 votes, and it sounds like this.
Michael Nicoll Yahgulanaas.
Oh, how can that be? That's an electronic voice. Oh, maybe.
Michael Nicoll Yahgulanaas.
No, come on.
Michael Nicoll Yahgulanaas.
These are all electronic voices. That does not help me. Okay, he did give a TED talk.
My name is Michael Nicoll Yahgulanaas. I am by decree a Canadian. My name is Michael Nicoll Yahgulanaas.
Yahgulanaas. Okay, so there is a Haida artist who makes Haida Manga. His name is Michael Nicoll Yahgulanaas. And I read his Haida manga entitled Carpe Fin. I didn't understand everything about it, but it was a glorious visual reading experience. I don't think Lindy has read this one, but she has read maybe one of his more well-known ones. This was the one that I could easily get access to. So I loved it, but I don't think that I understood everything about it. It's a modern retelling of a Haida myth about treating the environment with respect. I'll just show you a few of the graphics. So he's merging the. I'm losing my words because I don't know how to talk about art, but he's merging Haida art traditions and visual things, metaphors and meanings with the manga form. And I did watch a short interview with him where he talked about, this is probably the most fascinating thing in this entire Friday Reads. He talked about, and I will put a link to that video in the show notes, the fact that there was inter-Pacific contact between Japan and indigenous peoples of North America, and that in fact, at an earlier phase of history, Japan had been kind of a refuge or almost like an ally to the indigenous peoples on the Pacific coast of North America, which is something I know nothing about, and I am counting on some of you, I think Lindy might be one of them, to point me in the right direction to learn a whole bunch about this. But Haida Manga, I thought it was wonderful. It's probably the most visually stunning graphic anything that I've ever read or looked at, and I didn't quite follow everything about the story, but it was just a really quite joyous experience for me. And I gotta check again. Nothing! Ugh. So I've got one 91-word essay to mark before about 10 p.m. tonight, and that means that I will make, I don't know, it's 4 cents a word, basically 4 yen a word, so it's just, $6 or $5 or something, maybe less, I don't know, but I don't want to know. But if that's all I get today, I'm gonna be grumpy. Right now I'm optimistic I will find something, but let's get back to the books. And the other one that I started and finished yesterday was a short story that was individually published. It did come from a larger collection of short stories, but I found a standalone e-book for this one short story by the American-Canadian writer Thomas King, who often writes about Indigenous issues, and I describe his identity very particularly that way because, just because. I won't get into that. He's one of my favorite writers and has been a really educative writer in terms of my haphazard gradual awakening to Indigenous issues and Indigenous literature and culture. And this is his short story called Another Great Moment in Canadian Indian History. And it's part of, I think he's only had one short story collection published, and I'll put the GIF up here, I don't have that in my head. And I loved it, I gave it 5 stars. It is humorous with a serious backstory. So the premise of it is that there's been a Canadian Supreme Court ruling which denied a certain Indigenous tribe fishing and hunting rights on land that they claim as their own, but the judge's ruling said, and one of the members of this small little rinky-dink Indigenous community in British Columbia went to jail. So that's the serious undertow. I know there were court cases like that back in the day. Recently, the court cases, the Supreme Court seems to have been more enlightened, at least sometimes. So it's premised on probably a real life event that I don't know anything about. But this small little town, it's a group of ragtag indigenous people that are all a little bit scatterbrained. In addition to being incensed about the court ruling, these hapless people that live in this small indigenous town are equally incensed that their town name does not appear on any map. And so they're having meetings. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Should we have a protest? Should we do a blockade? And one old lady, and I'm going to stop with the synopsis soon because it is a short story, so I don't want to say too much. One old lady, she says, "We complain too much. Why don't we go and try to help the white people with their problems?" And they'll have a different opinion of us. So they decide en masse to travel to Victoria to help white people with white people problems. And hilarity and plot ensues. I thought it was a really subtle look at Indigenous settler relations in Canada. It was hilarious. I recommend it to you all very highly. It was a great appetizer because I am going to read another full-length Thomas King book during Indigathon. Stay tuned for that. So that is what I finished. I'm going to start 2 books in the coming week. One I have been looking forward to for all year, or ever since I finished the other book by this author from India. This is a novella called Bhaunri by the Rajasthani novelist Anukrti Upadhyay. I read the companion novella, which is not to say that they are sequels. They are both set in Rajasthan, but that's it. There's no other connection between them. But they were both published. They were published together. And I read Daura. And I just absolutely loved it. And I'm finally going to read this one, Bhaunri. I can't wait. And I'm also going to try another Indigenous novel published in Canada. This one is called Bone Black. I got this from the library. Bone Black by Carol Rose GoldenEagle. The publisher describes her also as a Saskatchewan author. And she used to be known as Carol Daniels, and I don't know anything about her. I just found this in the library. It's short, and it is going to be a heavy novel that tackles one of the most pressing issues in Canadian society and politics today, which is... I botched this all-important phrase. It is murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. And it's about a woman who disappears. So I am looking forward to it and dreading sinking into that story in equal measure. I'll report back in a week. Thanks for watching.